Hello again, everybody. This is Professor Watts, and today we are going to move ahead with principles in economics, talk about values in economics. So let me just start off here by kind of mentioning what economics is. Fundamentally, economics is the science or the study of human action under scarcity. Remember, science in a broad sense just means knowledge. We're trying to gain knowledge about how people act and behave, mostly in society. Now, we have a few propositions which we'll be fleshing out soon about how people act, and that's that they're rational and self-interested. So we might formally define what we're doing here as analyzing how do rational, self-interested individuals act and choose so as to seek out their self-chosen goals and desires. Economics does not analyze the content of people's needs, wants, goals, or desires. So we're not sitting here making judgments about whether people want the right thing in life, whether people are doing the right thing in life for themselves or for people around them. We're taking their preferences as given, and then we're saying, well, how do people go about trying to accomplish what they want to accomplish on their own? And this is termed value-free. We say economics is one of the value-free social sciences. When we're acting purely as economists, in other words, when I've got my economics hat on and I'm doing strictly economics, I'm not making value judgments about what people are doing, about the actions of the people that we're analyzing. Whether it's we're analyzing an individual person trying to achieve his or her goals, or whether we're analyzing a whole society, the political system, what have you. We know that people have pre-existing preferences for the things they want in the kind of lives they want to live. And the only way we can really know about those concretely is by what they actually do. And we say preference is revealed in action, because you can say one thing and then do another. So we really want to focus on what people actually do and then analyze how they pursue their preferences. That's whether we personally view them as right or wrong in their action, right? And then economics per se, which means in and of itself, cannot answer questions of right and wrong, what we ought to do, what we should do, what's moral, what's immoral, etc. Economics is not about what people ought to do. It's about what people do, given certain value systems, given certain incentive structures. So it's not that we don't have values when we're thinking economically. It's just that we bring those in from somewhere else. We kind of import them and we take them as given. We kind of freeze them in place, and then we do our analysis without making value judgments anew. And let me bring in a quote from one of my favorite all-time economists, Ludwig von Mises, who was a very important thinker in the development of economics. And he started off in Vienna, Austria in the early 1900s, and was part of what was known as the Austrian School of Economics, because it was centered in Vienna. He had to leave Austria and Europe in 1940 because he was ethnically Jewish, and of course the Nazis were tracking down the Jews and taking away their jobs and their property and harassing them, and of course ultimately engage in the mass slaughter of the Jews. So he was one of the fortunate ones that was able to escape, and he escaped to the United States and resumed his academic career. And the passage here I'm citing is from a really wonderful book that he wrote in 1949 called Human Action, which is a thoroughgoing treatise on economics. So here's what Mises has to say at the very beginning of the book about how we go about doing economics. Quote, "It is true that economics is a theoretical science and as such abstains from any judgment of value. It is not its task to tell people what ends they should aim at. It is a science of the means to be applied for the attainment of ends chosen, not, to be sure, a science of the choosing of ends. Ultimate decisions, the valuations and the choosing of ends, are beyond the scope of any science. Science never tells a man how he should act. It merely shows how a man must act if he wants to attain definite ends." End quote. Right? So I want to emphasize that idea there that science doesn't tell us what's right and wrong. Our value system that we live by is important, but it's outside of science. It's beyond the scope of science. So we're going to take those values and the judgments and the morals and all that stuff as pre-existing things that we already have, and then we build our analysis on them. So what about those values? Well, let me just comment on this briefly. Values, we might say that's the rules we live by, as Mises said, are beyond the scope of science in general, and in economics in particular as a social science. So where do they come from then? Well, if you reflect on this, you probably can think about how do I know what's right and wrong, and why do I act the way I act? One would be religion. What does God say?
God Jehovah has given unto you these 15, 10 commandments.
Or what do people say God says? But these aren't really questions for economics. These are questions I think you should pursue, and these are questions I definitely enjoy thinking about and discussing. But inside of economics, we might just say, well, most people get their values from their religious system, and then that's fine. Tradition might be another good candidate for where values come from.
Tradition, 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 tradition.
You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know.
People might not know exactly why they think certain actions are right and wrong, but they've been so inculcated in societies and civilizations over time that they're handed down because rules that work for the promulgation of a society are going to survive, and rules that don't work so well are going to tend to die out with the society that tried to implement them. So, for example, if a society had a rule that said it's okay to murder anyone who bugs you, well, then you'd probably have a lot of murders, and you'd probably have a pretty low birth rate and not a lot of repopulation of that society, so it'd die out, right? So all successful remaining societies had pretty strong rules about murder being wrong and not allowed, and then punishing people who do those kind of actions. So we have a core of basic values or basic behavioral norms that are pretty common across all societies, for the simple reason that a society can't survive without some basic set of rules and laws and norms. Okay, then finally I'll propose that conscience maybe is a source of value. Sometimes you know in your gut that something's right and wrong. You kind of get that sick feeling in your stomach if you see something bad happening, or you get that good feeling if you know something good, something right and proper is going on. We're just saying that economics is not a tool for answering these questions. We're going to take these things as givens that pre-exist out there inside of people, inside of society, and then we import that into our economic analysis. In other words, we don't use economics to address questions of values, of right and wrong. Okay, now back to applied economics, and we'll wrap up by kind of focusing on where we go with all of this. Well, we all live in a world of scarcity, and that's what we're about to expound upon in the next couple of lectures. And we are all striving to improve our self-defined well-being. We're trying to go somewhere. We're trying to do something. We're trying to better our own situation, however we define it. And as I just mentioned, we have pre-existing value systems, sets of rules and morals and behavior, code of conduct, if you will, that give us some parameters about what is right and wrong, what's allowed and what's not allowed, what we can do and what we can't do. Econ by itself gives us the structure for analyzing people's actions within their pre-existing values framework, or within their pre-existing morality. I like to say incentives matter, even for people that in society we might commonly view as criminals or deviants, people who deviate from accepted rules, behaviors, and norms. And we can analyze their behavior economically because it's mainly about how the incentive framework they operate in is guiding their decisions. And there is indeed a field of economics called the economics of crime, right? There's books about it. This author over here, Gary Becker, he won a Nobel Prize in economics for bringing economics fully into the analysis of criminal behavior, right? So we can analyze anything people do through an economic lens. We're not saying we agree with it, right? We're holding the values part kind of aside. Okay, so given our value system, whatever that may be, and then the specific goals we decided to pursue at whatever level we're talking about, you as an individual, maybe you and your family unit, you and your local community, whether that's your city or your neighborhood or a voluntary association or the entire nation, we can apply economic analysis and help us better achieve our goals, right? Given the goals, given the value judgments, where we bring them in from somewhere else, now we're going to talk about applying economic thinking or economic reasoning to help us make decisions that are hopefully going to be beneficial in the pursuit of those predetermined values, goals, and so on. Okay, so let me close by giving you 3 examples here, and I'll get kind of specific. So one, just at the personal level, and by the way, this is going to apply to you no matter what you wind up doing for a job or career, because we all have these questions of time management on a daily basis. So you're an accomplished amateur mechanic who enjoys working on cars. That's actually true for me. That's one of my biggest hobbies. I love working on old cars. You have garage space and all required tools for most auto maintenance procedures. Again, that's pretty true for me. So here's a question I face pretty often. Should I do my own oil changes or hire it out to the local shop? Well, sometimes I do my own oil change, sometimes I don't. And it all boils down to the logic of opportunity costs and comparative advantage. This is actually something we're going to learn in some detail. This is one of the first things we'll get into in depth in the class. It's a very useful, just analytical tool to help you think through these decisions and make better use of your time and be more productive, more efficient, and more successful in life. Right, let's move up to the business level. Profit maximization is the quest of any business. Right, so let's say you run a small online business selling highly specialized, personalized products. Should you cut prices to get more sales or raise prices to make more money per sale? Well, you might think if I cut prices to get more sales, if I get enough more sales, that will make up for the cutting prices and I could earn more profits. That's true in certain conditions. Or if you raise prices to make more money per sale, even if you lose some sales, if you raise the prices enough, you might still end up making more money. And that's true under certain conditions. So what determines what conditions you're operating under? Well, this has to do with the economics of elasticity of demand. And this is another thing we'll learn about in this class and apply. And we'll think about what is the profit maximizing strategy. It depends on the shape of your demand curve. So one of those courses of action is probably recommended to maximize profits. Okay, then finally, thinking about a public policy perspective. Let's say you're a politician trying to decide the best way to help millions of workers recently unemployed due to government-imposed lockdowns. Should you deliver aid via enhanced unemployment payments or via a one-time lump sum check with no unemployment stipulations attached? And I bring this up, of course, because this is fresh in the news here in summer of 2020, where we had the coronavirus lockdowns and a massive increase in unemployment, and we had at least so far one round of enhanced unemployment payments. But maybe that's not the best strategy, and here's why. Even if you really want to help the unemployed, because there's a thing called second order incentive effects, and both policies might have unintended consequences that we'd like to avoid, or we at least want to balance with the main goal of the policy, which is to, quote, help the unemployed. Okay, so we can use empirical analysis in this case to determine if the second order effects, where people have incentives to remain unemployed, lead to an unintended consequence of keeping unemployment higher than we want it to be, because we also don't want unemployment to be high, right? And again, I'll refer to something I mentioned in the previous lecture. You know, in the 2009 recession, when unemployment benefits were expanded, well, economists went back and looked at the data on that and found that, yeah, it did wind up causing unemployment to be maybe about 1 percentage point higher than it otherwise would have been. So there's an unintended consequence, and that's something we have to weigh against the goal of helping people, right? Which is the right thing to do? That's a trick question. As an economist, I can't tell you what's right, but here's, you know, a very useful framework for thinking about these effects. Incentives matter, right? And we have to analyze people, whatever goals they're trying to accomplish. In this case, it's politicians, you know, trying to, you know, do the right thing, or maybe just, you know, do what they think will get them reelected. We have to take those goals as given, or, you know, discuss them kind of outside of the context of economics, and then economics will allow us to analyze them in a very useful and very pragmatic manner. Okay, so I think we're really primed with kind of some thinking about how we do economics, and in lecture 3 we'll start jumping into some core principles and sizing up the economic situation that we all face. See you soon.